Do we have a determination of legal notice?
Yes.
This is the time in our agenda when we welcome participation from the public, and this item is limited to matters under the jurisdiction of the commission that are not on the posted agenda and items which have not already been considered by the commission. No action will be taken. Is there anyone here who is wishing to address the commission? Seeing no one, we will move on to the consent calendar, of which there is none. And so we are ready for the regular calendar, MS 2016-0006.
Madam Chair,
Oh,
did you
sorry,
want a director's report?
I did skip the director's report, sorry.
For the record, if you could announce that Commissioner Purnell is here.
Yes, and Commissioner Purnell has arrived. We were aware
Good.
that there was some road work and that you might.
Just a couple items, Madam Chair, members of the commission. On Tuesday, the Board of Supervisors did take up the cannabis facilities ordinance. They've made some changes to the ordinance, and they're bringing it back at their next meeting on October 17th. The idea is that October 10th, and they're going to be reviewing the ordinance again. The idea is that hopefully these items can be addressed, and then the ordinance would then be approved, and then it would take effect in late November. The other thing I just wanted to advise the commission, we're now down another building inspector in Fort Bragg. We've had an inspector leave the county and move on to, I'll say, greener pastures. We're also down 2 more clerical in Ukiah, so we are still in the recruitment process. The Mendocino Town Plan will be going to the Board of Supervisors on October 17th. And I also wanted to bring to the Commission's attention that the Vineyard Crossing subdivision, which is 123 lot parcel subdivision that would be located in the Lover's Lane vicinity, we are actually moving an EIR contract to the board on October 17th. So what to expect is that within about 11 months or so, you'll have a project before you with a draft EIR somewhere in there, like I said, in 10 to 11 months. So that project is now moving. The other thing that I'll be doing, because of the number of different types of projects that are needing attention, is I'll be bringing a work program to the Board of Supervisors before the end of the year that's going to be looking at some of our long-range projects, long-range planning projects. We have not done any long-range planning in the department since really I was last here in 2011, 2012. So the idea is that we've got several projects that need to come forward to the board. For example, this body approved the floodplain ordinance. It now requires an LCP amendment. So we're going to be working with the Coastal Commission on that, but then that's going to have to go to the board. We're looking at trying to look at the LCP and perhaps tackle it with the Noyo Harbor to begin with, and then move north or south. To do the entire LCP is a heavy lift, so what we need to look at is what are the areas that actually need immediate attention. And I've been discussing this with staff, and one of the areas that we really should look at is the Noyo Harbor. So my thought is a Noyo Harbor specific plan along with a Noyo Harbor LCP amendment. And I think that would get us going. I'll have to shuffle some staff around, but that is something we would like to do in-house as well. So again, other things that we've discussed here before have been changes to the second unit ordinance. The board recently had a moratorium regarding short-term rentals. They felt that the short-term rentals were taking away from the affordability, from the housing. That moratorium was not extended, but in essence, we're having to look at Chapter 20.164. So while we're doing that, we're looking at a comprehensive update of that chapter. So that's something that, again, needs to be prioritized and moved. And these are all things that will affect the commission because these are all land use issues that we'll be bringing forth to the commission. So I just wanted to advise you that the way I'm going to approach this is put together a list of items, take them to the board, have them prioritized, and then I'll report back to the commission into what order they're going to be coming. Seems like we've been completely focusing on cannabis these last few months, but we also need to focus on some land use issues beyond cannabis. And that would conclude my director's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Okay, we will move on to the regular calendar, MS 2016-0006.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sandy, Planning Building Services. It's not on. This morning I have for you a minor subdivision in Yorkville. It is located about 7 miles south of Yorkville at the intersection of State Highway 128 and Mountain House Road, which is County Road 111. The southern portion of the southern point of the parcel is where those two roads meet. The request is for a subdivision of 160 plus acres into 3 40 plus acres and a remainder parcel of 40 plus acres. The general plan and zoning is agriculture 40. And for the characteristics of the site, the parcel, or the remainder parcel, which is parcel number 3 on the tentative map, is developed with a single family residence, a barn, and an agricultural pond. There's also some vineyards and 2 existing wells. The remainder of the parcels are relatively undeveloped. I think parcel 2 has a well on it. The other 2, parcels 1 and 4, are undeveloped. The site is fairly hilly and rigid terrain with some oak woodlands scattered throughout the parcel. Let me switch to here. The proposed parcels will be gaining access from both State Highway 128 and Mountain House Road. I believe parcel 4, 2, and 3 will be gaining their access from Mountain House Road, and parcel 1 will be gaining its access from State Highway 128.
Very dark. Can't see
I
that.
provided maps to
Oh,
the
this is
commissioners. Yeah,
this
you
is
should
the
have
parcel
a
map.
bigger map.
Much easier to see.
Yeah. Let's see. It's within the Anderson Valley Fire District and is serviced by the Anderson Valley Community Services District. I found that the subdivision was consistent with both the general plan and zoning district. It also, with regards to the general plan, helps meet housing goal 3.1, which encourages more adequate housing supply, as well as Anderson Valley community goal number 2, which is also expanding economic and housing opportunities in the valley. With regards to environmental protection, a initial study for CEQA was completed, and it was determined that there would be no significant environmental impacts through the subdivision. And finally, the subdivision went to the subdivision committee on April 13th of this year, and they found that there would be no violations of the Division of Land regulations. And before I recommend approval, I'd just like to go quickly over, there was a memo from the Mendocino County Department of Transportation requesting a few corrections to their conditions. Corrections include changes to condition 17, 21A, and the removal of condition 22. And then Commissioner Warner, you had some comments as well for me. So there should be a correction on page 4 of the staff report where it refers to, it's the second paragraph, and it refers to the rural community district, and that should be changed to ag district. Additionally, you mentioned, if we go to map or attachment J, you were concerned about the rural residential and rural commercial. I spoke with our cartographer, and those are the terms the state uses for that symbolism in that blue area. So that is the correct terminology from what I understand. And then lastly, you were noting about the oak woodlands, and we do have a condition in the resolution that I think it's, I don't have the conditions with me, but I think it's
I don't remember seeing that.
Condition number 6, which recommends following the NCRM botanical study. And within that botanical study, it does outline that any oaks over a 6-inch in diameter should be protected from removal. And with that, I recommend approval of the subdivision with the modifications.
Any questions for staff? If not, we'd like to hear from the applicant.
Good morning. Jim Ronco. And I have Mr. and Mrs. Opatz here, as well as Vance Ricks, the surveyor, who's been working on this project. Am I on? Okay. What we brought before you today is a 4-parcel minor subdivision of agriculturally orientated land, as Mr. Vandy has said. What we intended to do and hopefully have done in bringing this forward is to incorporate into our design of this land division the vision of Mr. and Mrs. Opatz, who currently live on the property and intend to continue to live on this property, and make available to their children and others the opportunity to live and grow here. They have attempted to put together a set of CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, restrictions, which will dovetail in with what they've already shown you on the parcel map, with their concern for the environment and making this land division a sustainable operation. You will probably note that we have incorporated into the tentative map wildlife corridors. We've also put into the tentative map, which will be part of the recorded map, a scenic view corridor easement along Highway 128. And it's far-reaching. It goes from the intersection all the way basically along the length of our frontage on Highway 128. The Opatzes have decided in their covenants, conditions, and restrictions to incorporate language that says no parcel shall be used except for residential, agricultural, animal husbandry purposes. No parcel will have public access events for hire. However, nothing will exclude wineries and associated uses on the parcels. What they've attempted to do in their CC&Rs is to incorporate what we hope to be the best management practices for operating agricultural lands. They have incorporated 10% of all landscape plants must incorporate pollen resources to support wild bee populations. Wherever possible, drought-resistant native plant species shall be utilized. All landscaping planting shall incorporate drip irrigation. All residential structures shall be constructed to include rain gutters and rain barrels, so that water can be used to augment both residential and agricultural purposes. our CCNRs say if a tree is removed, we will plant 10 for each one that's removed. The agricultural operations are supposed to incorporate pest management, including but not limited to placing owl boxes and bluebird boxes throughout the property. All animal grazing shall include containment fencing of 5-strand barbed wire with 10-foot spacings. They're going to also incorporate into this 160-plus acre division a grazing plan that they're going to have done so that all 4 parcels are incorporated in grazing on the property. They've done the same thing with the road maintenance. They're just driveways we're going to have to construct onto Mountain House Road to satisfy the minor subdivision, but there will be other roads, and they're going to basically attempt to coordinate all road maintenance on the 4 parcels so that it's done comprehensively and in the same fashion. They also have recognized that there is a real issue. I think it's probably predominantly happening in all the Oak Woodland and Mendocino County. We call it pig cultivation, but the wild pigs or domesticated pig gone wild now really produce an awful lot of erosion and hardwood destruction. So we're going to integrate into that what we can, at least on our parcels, to be able to control pig cultivation. We've also, based on our botanical study done by North Coast Resource Management, we found that there is goat grass on the property, and they've already undertaken the steps necessary to attempt to eradicate goat grass as best we can. One of the things that wasn't in the staff report but is in our CCNRs is, you know, the whole idea of being as sustainable as we can be. Mr. and Mrs. Opatz recognize the fact that we do not have volunteer fire department facilities or services necessarily in this area. Across the road from us, there's an event facility, there's a bed and breakfast, they hold weddings, there's wineries along the way, there's multiple unit transient habitation in the area. What the OPATs have put into their CCNRs is that each of the parcels will contribute 1/4 of the cost, the initial cost of the construction of a metal single fire engine storage structure for the volunteer fire department. Now, this is what they're going to do because they recognize that this is a community, they're part of it, and that's why they've done what they can to make this as sustainable as possible. So that's what we're attempting to bring to the table here, and we hopefully request an approval of our project, and we'll move forward. So if anybody has any questions.
I think I may have missed it, but how are the CCNRs going to be implemented? Will they be recorded or?
Absolutely, they will be recorded.
Okay.
Yep. At this stage, they're 5 pages. I gave you the highlights. You know, we had to put in all the boilerplate that makes them enforceable. The CCNRs, as considered and drafted at this point, will run for 50 years. So we're going to get a couple generations out of this. They can, however, be modified, as all CCNRs generally are, by a vote of 3/4, in this case, of the property owners. But that's the best we can do at this point.
Could you speak a little bit more to the particulars of the wildlife corridor? And does it involve fencing and what else?
Well, in our CCNRs, we put in there that we cannot block the wildlife corridors with fencing, and we've attempted to incorporate in the fencing requirements 5-strand barbed wire, which is going to be hopefully less intrusive. The wildlife corridors will not be fenced. There will be no agricultural fencing that will intrude into the wildlife corridors. That's not to say that we have identified potential building sites. That's where we're going to build. We've also been able to identify areas that are suitable to either vineyard development or olive tree planting and that sort of thing. Those areas do not interfere with wildlife corridors. So as you can see, there are a significant number of wildlife corridors which let the wildlife go to the highway so they can get hit. we can't change that either.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Good questions, yes.
One other question. What is, could you give me a description of the wildlife corridor? What actually is that?
What that is an unimpeded path with no development that allows deer or other four-legged animals to pass through without being impeded.
And how wide is that?
We haven't defined the width. You know, I don't think what we're intending to do is create a tunnel. So at this point, we're not going to be fencing along the corridor. The fencing that will occur will just be around the agricultural areas that would require security so that the edibles aren't eaten. And then the grazing will occur through the wildlife corridor. So it'll be shared with livestock.
Okay, so the corridor is just an area where there's not going to be any blockage of
Exactly.
wildlife going back and forth.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Ronco? Thank you. I've been asked to just mention that Commissioner Purnell did arrive during Vandy's staff report, so. And Molly. And Commissioner Warner also. Any further questions or comments from, okay, then we will open the public hearing on this issue. Any members of the public who wish to speak to this item? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
The director has a
Yes.
If I may, through the chair, Nash Gonzalez, interim director, just wanted to go ahead and point out that the Division of Land Regulations calls for an applicant to submit CC&Rs to the department when they're filing a major subdivision. In this case, this is a minor subdivision, so the department has not seen or reviewed any CC&Rs. That is completely a private matter, and as what was discussed by Mr. Ronco, again, is not something that the planning department would be looking at or enforcing. So again, this is something that they're doing on their own.
I have a question actually on that topic. When there are, not specific to this project, but when there is CC&Rs, does that automatically imply that there is a housing association or something in that subdivision to enforce those CC&Rs?
Not necessarily. CC&Rs can be enforced by anyone. They can be enforced by the neighbors. They can be enforced by the subdivider. Traditionally, CC&Rs are set up to enhance and maintain values of the property. And so, as what was pointed out, CC&Rs would be on this property or these properties for 50 years. The idea is that you want to ensure some sort of consistency in the development of parcels for a period of time, then they sunset. Just like we had CC&Rs in Brook Trails and in many other portions of the county, the idea is that the longer these go out, it ensures that there will be some sort of consistency with the development, and then they in essence go away. But CC&Rs can be enforced by anyone. In fact, anybody driving down the road that sees something out of the ordinary, they can file a lawsuit in Superior Court and enforce CC&Rs.
Learn something new every day. Yes.
So you generated a question in my mind too. So when the CC&Rs sunset, can they be renewed, or is that the end, or how does that work?
Typically, CC&Rs can be renewed, but by a majority of the voters of that subdivision. So it would be voters or property owners. And I believe it was mentioned that 3/4 of the members of the subdivision. Again, they can be renewed. Oftentimes, they just basically go away because there's no need to continue them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'll just make a comment. It seems like a well-done subdivision. I was worried about that wording on attachment J of rural commercial being next door to it. It just doesn't seem like this is an area for rural commercial, but now I'm satisfied that's just the state term. Means nothing to the surrounding properties, really.
Correct. It's specifically used for the farmland terminology.
And has the amendment to the condition about the easement been amended in this resolution?
I don't believe it has yet, but it will be after it gets approved. Victoria will be able to make those changes.
Yes.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Godrowski, I can recommend a place in the reso to insert those changes as part of your motion to move forward.
If we're ready for that.
So I would recommend in the second, be it further resolved, the very bottom of the first page of the resolution. It currently reads, be it further resolved that the Planning Commission hereby grants the requested minor subdivision subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit A attached hereto. I would then add, after hereto, comma, with the following modifications. And in separate paragraphs, we would add after this meeting, condition number 17 shall be changed to read as follows, and we would insert the language from the DOT request. Next paragraph, condition number 21A shall be changed to read as follows, inserting the language from the DOT request. And thirdly, condition number 22 shall be replaced by intentionally omitted.
I still move.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, let's have a vote.
Commissioner Purnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Warner?
Yes.
Commissioner Hall?
Yes.
And Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Holtkamp?
Yes.
And 6-0. Did I get them all?
Yes.
6-0.
Thank you. Any matters from staff?
Madam Chair.
Any matters from commission? No?
Actually, I guess I should announce, I think I will be missing the second meeting in November if we have one.
I do have a comment.
Yes.
At the last meeting, the director alerted me to the fact that the Resources Committee of the board, which is a subcommittee, was going to have a hearing on Class K housing. The building department is redoing the ordinance for Class K housing. And so I went through the ordeal of 2 hours watching the video of Supervisor Hamburg and Supervisor McCowan going back and forth about the 6 major amendments to the Class K housing. One of them is if they're going to permit these Class K houses, they might have to install sprinkler systems. So it's really a big item. And this has a direct effect on everything that we're talking about in regard to housing. Because the cannabis inspections now are turning up all kinds of violations. And the first step is to say, well, it's a Class K. Okay, if it's a Class K, you gotta get a permit. And so now they're redoing the ordinance, because the ordinance was first put out in 1981. So it's way out of date, and they're bringing it up to date in accordance with the state building codes. So I would recommend that you go into either YouTube or the county website and take a look at that video. And it'll give you some really good insight if we have to have any discussion on Class K housing. And they essentially did not come to any real agreement. And they said, well, let's just take it to the board. So at this particular stage, after looking at those two, I sure hope we don't get that set of amendments and have to start wrestling with them. But it would be a good insight to take a look at what's happening with Class K.
Yes.
So, Deputy County Counsel, just to comment and I think clarify where that currently stands. That was that item was re-referred back to the committee of the board for further review. So we're still working on. They want that to come back to the committee first before going back to the board of supervisors for any further action. So I believe it's the Public Health, Safety, and Resources Committee of the board will hear it at least one more time. I can't speak exactly to what date.
And is it anticipated that that item will or won't be coming before this commission?
These are building code changes, so they're not required. They're not really the purview of the planning commission in particular. And so right now it'd be the committee to the board after that.
Thank you.
Okay, we have approval of the April 6th, 2017 minutes.
Chair Holt, can I speak to the minutes as well?
Yes.
Again, Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski. I would actually request, and I apologize to bring this to you at this point, as before the meeting, I'd like to continue these minutes to a future meeting. I saw I had a handful of questions I wanted to confirm before we move forward on these minutes.
Okay, well, do we need to make a motion and vote on that, or can we just agree to continue them?
If we can get an agreement to continue to a date uncertain, they'll be noticed as part of whatever meeting they come back as a part of. But if we can get just a quick motion to continue.
I'll make a motion to continue the minutes.
Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So you'll bring those back when your questions are resolved. That brings us to adjournment. Sorry for you far-traveling folks, but it's the way it goes.
Yep. I'll move for adjournment.
Second.
All opposed, duck.